Synergizers, and welcome back to another episode of the Creating Synergy podcast. My name is Daniel Franco, and today we have an expert in all things entrepreneurship and workforce planning, the lovely Wendy Perry, on the show. Wendy is the Managing Director of Workforce Blueprint and an entrepreneur facilitator for Adelaide's West Switch Start Scale. Wendy is an entrepreneur herself, with her work doing business all over the world. Further to this, she is also an author, an educator, an explorer, an innovator, a mentor and speaker on entrepreneurship and innovation. Wendy is also a renowned expert in workforce planning and development, vocational education and training, international capability, and capacity development. Wendy is living a life of purpose, working to her strengths in mentoring and facilitation, where she works alongside entrepreneurs, founders, individuals, organisations, startups, scale-ups, students, and unicorn companies. On top of this, Wendy is strongly aligned to other business interests and partnerships, which include Australia Bhutan Ventures, Blue Poppy Ventures, and Big Kid Ventures. So in this episode, Wendy shares her insights into her career journey, to the world where she finds herself today, her description of an entrepreneurial mindset, and her approach to scaling business globally, with tips on where to start, what countries to look for, and a typical approach to take. We also discussed how to improve productivity and get stuff done, which is a very important topic, and how she manages her busy schedule. We talk about workforce strategy and why it's important, what the future of work looks like, and to finish up, Wendy shared with us her meaning of her personal hashtag humble hustle. If you love the episode, which I know you will, be sure to hit subscribe button and check us out at SynergyIQ.com.au and SynergyIQ on all the social media outlets. Cheers. Excellent. So welcome back to the Creating Synergy podcast. My name is Daniel Franco, your host, and today we have the wonderful Wendy Perry on the show. Yeah. Thank you for coming on the show, Wendy.
No worries. It's nice to be called wonderful too. It's great.
Excellent. Well, just the WW, the double dot.
Got to do it. What's your D? What's in front of your name?
Delightful. Delightful Daniel. Yeah, that'll work. So, expert, coach, facilitator, keynote, all the above, expert in entrepreneurship, workforce planning, 20-odd thousand followers on LinkedIn, so a very large following, work all around the world.
Yep.
Who is Wendy Perry, and how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, I guess sort of from a core belief point of view, I want to support other people to do well. Yeah. And the angle that I most appreciate or enjoy supporting people with is their own business or their own kind of enterprise or pursuits. Doing something that you kind of care about or that you're passionate about, that you can make money from, that you can kind of explore the world if you want to. That's what I love to see people kind of do. Having their own economic independence and developing themselves is really important. So that's sort of a core belief or philosophy. And it's sort of been through my whole career, I guess, from the beginning too. So I've had different job roles, different businesses, and we can delve into that if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, first and foremost, thank you for offering and growing people in this area. It's obviously a very important world. The world wouldn't be, or the business world wouldn't be where we are if it wasn't for entrepreneurs. So the work you're doing in working with them, specifically in their mindset, is thank you and kudos to you. No, so let's dive into a little bit of your background. Yeah. Where did you come from and how did you get to where you are today?
Pretty humble kind of roots, really. And the very first job that I had was as a trainee. And so that was in government, in business administration kind of role. But alongside entrepreneurship and economic development, it's kind of like a series of E's. So like education and employment is really a focus working with people too. And I truly believe in people developing themselves, all through their lives. But I had that experience, when I was in my late teens and, you're green back then, you don't know any other difference. So I used to go and have meetings with people who were managers and leaders and, suggest ideas and all sorts of things. And I sort of finished that quite early, compared to how long it normally takes people to do that kind of length of course. And I remember calling a meeting with the woman who was leading the training area at the TAFE Institute. And I said, I want to train in this. I want to help other, young people and trainees and so on.
Yeah.
So, you look back at it and you go, it's pretty cheeky now.
Yeah.
But hey,
Why not?
it sort of set the scene. And
If you don't ask, you don't get, really.
yeah. So I had a couple of promotions there, and then I thought I wanted something a little bit different. So I was doing a little bit of casual teaching at the time.
Mhm.
So more like adults sort of context rather than schools. And I worked for Telstra for a while in the contact centre kind of industry, which came back a little bit later, which we'll touch on at the moment. My husband and I, we were married quite young. We were married when we were 20. So we already had one daughter, and then we had a second one when we were only 21.
Yeah.
So we were like, he was like the apprentice and I was like the trainee. And then over time, we both built businesses.
There you go.
But I started doing a bit more teaching casually. And then I was about 25 and I was offered a role as educational manager in TAFE SA. And I'd had other roles working in private training organisations and things like that too. Yeah. So that was like an unbelievable education, because the role that I had was in business development, and education is a very particular market. Mm-hmm. And one day I'd go out to see the automotive guys, and the next day aged care, the next day viticulture, all of these different industry sectors, and you'd never be able to, get that kind of learning without being fully immersed. And that was around fee-for-service, apprenticeships, traineeships, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
The BD world, I guess you're always researching the industry, so you're learning from your own perspective, but then also hearing them speak and learn.
Yeah. And, I was the youngest manager ever in TAFE SA, and I would go out with colleagues from different industry sectors, like we'd go to hospitality people, we'd go down to McLaren Vale, meet restaurateurs or whatever. But often I would find myself, taking a bit of a lead, because they weren't sure about how to have those conversations about what the workforce needs were. And I remember we'd drive down in the car if we were going to McLaren Vale or somewhere, and we'd talk about how we're going to have the chat. Because until you get into a situation and then you see it kind of play out, and then you're like, oh, we shouldn't have done it like that. So you do a little bit of prep. And often these experienced people, have got all these years in the industry, but they don't have this other sort of component. And I remember kicking a few people under the table or whatever, but they would normally let me, kind of take the intro and to find out about, basically ask questions. Where was that employer at? What were they trying to do? Yeah. How many people work for them? So, putting them as the star of the show, if you like, and being really curious about that business. So that was probably the early sort of side of that strategic workforce planning and development kind of experience that grew to.
How did it just naturally come to you? Did you do a bit of study in that space? Where did this learning about workforce planning come? And did it come easily to you, or did you have to work and learn and strategize for it?
It was a real mix of things. So, I definitely believe in practical on-the-job immersion and things like that, but kind of like, well, how did you know what to do? I did also do a Masters of Education early in my 20s, which had an adult learning sort of focus and leadership and management programs as well. But I think that role that I had sort of set the scene, because basically where else would you get experience working across literally every industry sector that there is? But the thing about it is that there's so much commonality. So whilst I was at TAFE, I was also asked to do some work with what was called an industry training advisory board back then. And so that wasn't just looking at organisation by organisation, that was looking at whole industry sectors. And there was this thing called Business Vision 2010. You might be a little bit too young to remember it.
Yeah.
But it was...
Depends on the year, but sure. I don't remember it, so maybe...
No, I think you're a bit too younger. So it was like state government, was Liberal government at the time, and it was a state government policy, and they would pick up key priorities that they wanted to put in place by the year 2010. Okay. And one of the priorities was women into the IT industry. Yes. So I was seconded across to do that particular project. And we would do quarterly updates, at the festival centre or convention centre. There'd be all these different business industry employers there. You had like ambassadors that were attached to these different projects, and committee groups. So the kind of level of networking that you were exposed to was really great, and the support. So I think, employer industry based, having that education context, and then seeing that industry kind of level and seeing that broader kind of government policy perspective and the interconnections of those projects was a really great grounding for it.
Brilliant. So from there,
Yep.
you've decided that you want to go out and start your own. I mean,
There's one more role before
One more
that.
role?
One more role. So I was asked to come across and join the policy team working for the Department of Education,
yes, yep.
which was looking at employer kind of connections into, this time, mostly high school, vocational education and training, and SACE, and which is the South Australian Certificate of Education. So, but I only did that for a year or two. Then we had election time, and because that team was the one that implemented policy, they really weren't sure what was going to happen with that group. So they kind of said, like, if there's something else that you want to pursue, we were open to it. And I had all these people saying, oh, can you do this project? Can you work for us on this? Can you consult on this? And I'm like, well, I can't because I'm full-time and, I'm working in government. But I was able to negotiate 2 days and 3 days a week for 3 months.
Excellent.
And then I'm like, right, that's it. I'm quitting.
Yeah.
I knew I'd be fine, because I had just work
had the work
rolling
coming
in. Yeah.
At what point in your journey did you is it at the only time that you thought, actually, I could go out and start my own gig here, was when you were faced with the impending potential loss of your job, or did you have this sort of building in the background and thinking, do I actually want to work for someone forever?
Yeah, definitely building in the background. And my mindset wasn't it wasn't the conversation, oh, you're going to lose your job. It just might be they'll have a different focus maybe or whatever.
Okay.
So the job would still be there. But I'm like, in some respects, the higher you kind of get up in some of these bureaucracies, the less independence and freedom you have. And that doesn't suit me at all. So from
bit of red tape.
I'd prefer to have variety, make suggestions, implement things, and not get permission have to get permission from other people.
I know the feeling.
When I did have that role in TAFE, and even before that, when I was in contact centres, like that's selling, right?
Yeah.
With that role at TAFE, they only had a few $100,000 worth of business coming in with traineeships and apprenticeships and some fee for service. And in like 6 months, I took it to a couple of million. So I kind of knew that I could do that. So I always had, you might describe it as an entrepreneurial streak. I'm like, if I can do this for them, and which is kind of like a bit of a hard slog, to be honest, in terms of what you're selling and marketing, and, you're still working within a, government sort of agency. Then surely I can do it for myself. So that's why I had the confidence, I guess.
And so when you did move out, you had some work coming in.
Yeah.
Were you hit pretty quickly with the world of business in the sense of, when you start out in your own business, and I've been through it, and I know many people have been through it, and that first couple of years it's, oh, maybe I'm not cut out for this sort of stuff. How did you work on your mindset and obviously the ups and downs that business can bring, the constant hustle that it might throw at you?
Yeah.
How did you manage yourself in that space?
I reckon I didn't really have those sorts of feelings until much later. So at this time, this is 20 years ago, right? I'm 28.
Yeah.
And confident as, know. And I sent out a letter. World's your oyster. And you don't know much better. You kind of just do what you think you can, and kind of being a bit green and not exactly cheeky, but, being positive, suggesting things, reaching out to people kind of gets you far. And I remember I sent a letter, right? So that's what we did back in the day, to 30 people.
Went through by Dove, or is that like that?
Not that old, Jesus. Posted this letter to all these connections that I had, because I did have decent networks for somebody, going out. But I sent this letter out, and from that got a number of jobs. One contract I got was with a national program that was basically in a particular industry sector working on their workforce. Yeah. And it happened to be based here in Adelaide, which was unusual. And I had that contract kind of like as a backbone, a couple of days a week. It ended up being for 8 or 9 years. So in that role, I coached and mentored a couple of hundred projects that people would apply for funding, and then this is all from around the country, and it was a real variety of different areas. And then you'd be assigned a certain allocation of projects to coach and mentor. And because of the kind of marketing and BD background, I also managed the national conference and literally did all their marketing. So it was, with that, obviously I had that context of that organisation's hat on. But that can't help but extend your networks and build your personal brand. And, you fly around the country all the time. I used to fly, a couple of times a month or something like that at this time. So that then, when you say about the workforce planning and development experience, at this time I was more focused on the education sector actually.
Yeah.
So that then, though, put me into the context of, again, looking inside all these different regions, locations, industry sectors, tiny employers up to massive multinationals. So it was a great kind of education that you got. Mm.
What were the typical ups and downs that you used to face, though? I mean, were you always, if you're securing 8 or 9 year contracts, it's less downtime in that space and more about just the constant workload that you have to manage through?
Well, I didn't know that it was an 8 or 9 year contract at the time. It was just like a year-on-year thing.
Oh, I see.
So there's always still the thing of filling the pipeline, and then you've got other time, right? So, of course, you've got to still attract projects and whatever. And the other personal challenges were more about the travel and the kind of time commitment.
And managing a family.
Managing a young family.
Because you've got 2 girls?
Yeah, 2 daughters. So, what were they at the time? They were sort of like under 10, I guess. And my husband Scott's had his own business too. So
what's he do?
So he runs a building construction company. He's originally a plumber and mechanical services, and he's had a brewery and other sorts of interests and property and stuff over the years too.
So your children have no choice but to be entrepreneurs.
Well, the eldest one is like, I definitely do not want to be entrepreneurial. So she worked more for other people, but still worked more for entrepreneurs, if you like. She worked for a university too. And then now she has her own side hustle business as well as her main business. Our youngest daughter, she started working in my company from when she was 16. I mean, officially, because, when they were kids, they would do tasks and things and come to events.
Do the filing, that's it.
Stuff the envelopes, whatever it might be. So she started as a school-based apprentice in our business, and she didn't like the way that career education was delivered at her school. So she started a business to basically address that.
So they're entrepreneurs. So what are their names?
So Amy and Jess. Excellent. Yeah, and we have son-in-laws as well.
Oh, beautiful.
We have Dan and Tyler. So
not like grandparents yet.
No, but probably on the horizon pretty soon.
Excellent. Yeah. Must be very proud.
Very proud, yeah.
I'm really interested in, you talked about you flying a lot, and you and I have talked offline about starting a business, and we'll get into the entrepreneurial mindset and what that looks like. But when starting a business, it is a common thought process of need a product, need something to sell, need a service, not something that people would buy and pay money for, right?
Yeah.
We always look locally. We always look who around us can buy, and how do we and how does that work?
Yeah.
It seems to me, and just through your mindset, that you've not got those sort of blinkers on, in the sense that you're looking globally, which you are. You are working on a global scale. I really want to unpack the thought process and even maybe the procedures around what that looks like. Do we start locally, then we go interstate, and then we go globally, or do you just go straight? Like, or is there no method, or what do you suggest for anyone that is looking at starting something which could potentially grow? You got the Toby Pierces of the world who's gone out and built this app that's just gone international straight away, and obviously in the news from selling for a couple $100 million, or if not more. Just interested in your thought process.
Yeah. There's a couple of things that boils back down to. So as a foundation sort of point, and I guess I see this a lot as the entrepreneurship facilitator for Adelaide, like I'll meet with 15 or 20 people a week, and they'll kind of share with me what their ideas might be for a potential business. And it could be an idea or it could be up and running. It's kind of like, okay, yes, we still boil it back down to what's the problem that you're solving, what's the minimum viable product or service that you've developed. Because some people take a long time to do that, and then they think that they have to test it in very complex ways, and they don't necessarily take on board feedback, or they get feedback from people who are not even relevant. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think you
When you say they're
definitely,
not relevant, are you meaning they're not their end user? They're not the client or
they're
the
never going to
buyer?
buy from you.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean? They're never going to buy from you. And even there might be some people who see themselves in a mentoring or coaching role, but they're never your customer. They've not been in your shoes. They don't know this industry specifically.
yeah.
So you've got to be really discerning about the actual evidence that you use. And will people really put money, pay
Yeah.
for it? Are they going to pay for this thing? And not just in a sympathy, nice way because they are your friend or family,
Yeah.
So
So
that's
actually getting outside of your comfort zone and seeking people who are going to give you some pretty constructive feedback.
yeah. And, you've got to really do that through networking and building up relationships. So I think it is important that you do have like a local base. You've got to have a track record somehow. But, South Australian market's tiny, even Australian market's very small with 25 million people, right? Sometimes it can actually be easier, depending upon what it is that you're selling, to sell interstate. Because here in Adelaide, like our strength is how collaborative and network we are.
Yeah.
But sometimes that can be a bit tricky.
It's a very relationship-driven.
Yeah.
Well, the old saying is if you can do business in South Australia, you can do business anywhere.
Yeah, for sure.
Why is that though? Why is it so easy? Why is it that we can go on interstate, knock on a door, and pretty much get a meeting, as opposed to here you have to be mates or get introduced with someone?
Yeah, well, I guess there's a couple of things. I mean, we are small. We are very well networked from a business industry, entrepreneurial point of view. People have perspectives or views, right or wrong, about somebody's level of experience or capability or capacity. And that might be outdated now, even though the person's sort of grown and developed beyond that. But, we all think about, oh, well, I know this person about, they're at this level and they do this sort of thing.
Yeah.
Now it's much easier to get meetings and things interstate. But when I first started the company, it wasn't that easy because it was like you were from Adelaide, South Australia. You're not from Sydney or Melbourne, or do you know what I mean? That's changed over time. And I think part of it is kind of related to our state branding. Like now many people are envious of our lifestyle and potentially want to live here or holiday here or whatever. And we've seen more examples of innovative organisations and products and things come out of SA. So we've sort of leveled up. If you can kind of grab that common ground, so you've always got to get some sort of hook or reason as to why you're reaching out to someone. You're not just going to do it randomly. So maybe you've got a connection in common that can see something collaborative that you can work on, or you've been following them on social media or LinkedIn and that you can see they're interested in something in particular. So from a lead gen or business development point of view, or trying to build a relationship, you have to have some sort of connection or foundation. Internationally, we can talk about that, I guess, in a sec.
Yeah. I just wanted to touch on that when you're sort of reaching out for a hook or a reason or introduction.
Yeah.
One thing I would like to point out, and people often come to me, and even just working in the business growth aspect of my business, reaching out once is not necessarily. I would say 90% of the time, reaching out once, like with one email or one LinkedIn message or one phone call or one text message, whatever it might be, isn't going to get you anywhere. It's constant. And they say that the statistics are it takes almost 8 to 9 times to actually get in touch with someone. I would say, by my experience, most people are too busy to read the first one. So you email 2, 3, 4 times, whatever it is, follow up with a phone call. I've seen and just purely been thanked for reaching out 2 or 3 times purely from the other person going, sorry, I missed your first one, but I really wanted to connect with you, whatever it might be. Yeah. So I think the key point in that is don't just stop at the first email. If you don't get a response, it's not over. You should keep pursuing.
Well, you've got to balance that because you can't be a pest. But I know that's not what you mean, but you've got to be genuine and you've got to have a real reason that you're adding value. Like if somebody, connects with me on LinkedIn and they inbox a message straight away, like delete.
Yeah.
If it's not kind of customized or personalized, if they've not thought through why would we even connect or potentially do business. And even yesterday I had a guy like call me, I just looked at your LinkedIn profile and I'm like, block his number. You know what I mean? Like it's not good practice at all.
I'm glad I got through.
You're all good. You're all good.
So internationally then, okay, so we go into state. So what?
Yeah.
All right. I'm a business in South Australia. I've started up. I'm doing pretty well. I want to move into state. Well, not move into state, but I want to grow my business into state.
Yeah.
What do I do? Where do I start?
Yeah. So I guess the easiest way, I think, in the sort of business that you have, and obviously it depends upon the context, is
Yeah,
think down more
Let's say
like,
generically. It doesn't need to
yeah,
necessarily be.
but you can't have a scattergun approach either, and you've got limited time, money, and resources. And so you've got to sort of hone in, okay, where might the best connection or fit be?
Mhm.
Is that down an industry kind of line in terms of thinking about a bit of a segment? Or is that more about some sort of location or region?
Mhm.
Or is it more about the kind of profession that the person has? Like they
Yeah.
might be a HR manager or a CEO or whatever. So then you think
So
through.
really betting down your strategy on what
Yeah, and
why
like your
you're doing it.
target market and
Yeah.
like prioritizing that. But then you think through, where are they hanging out? So are they members of a peak body or a professional association, or are they connected to each other in some way, shape, or form? And I always have this sort of rule about like 4 for 1. So it sort of plays in here, but it plays into other things. It's like, can you kind of like do things once and get 4 times the return? Can you reach out to an industry association, for example, maybe be a speaker or offer to do something, and then get that whole database,
Yeah.
connected into what, or aware of what you're doing?
Yeah.
So, conferences used to be a great way to do it. That's much trickier now. But events, still as a strategy is a good way to kind of like go. But I always think through, if you're going to go into state or potentially think about scaling up your business, then you need some other aligned partners that are also trying to do something similar to you.
Mhm.
So membership organization could be because they want to add value.
Yeah.
Or maybe there's another company or a couple where you've got that same target market in common, and you're offering different things, and you can somehow leverage each other's databases
Mhm.
and connections.
Excellent. So do you need to fly though? Do you need to get over there and get in amongst it? Like in the
Like if you
world?
asked me 2 years ago, I would have said for sure.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, I mean,
You can Zoom.
well, it's trickier. I mean, obviously you can speak at online events and things like that, and you can have meetings. Um, if you are, say, looking at peak bodies or professional associations, they've all had to adapt, and they're all trying to still add value around why be a member of this association. So that now gives you an opportunity to offer something or leverage something if you know what they need. The other thing that I found, which is sort of it's not counterintuitive, but through the pandemic and lockdowns, like I've reached out to people in Canada and the UK and the US who I would never ever normally, like, they're like authors or
Yeah.
got massive, leaders in a certain field or whatever. Hey, would you come on and do a webinar or, do a live chat or whatever? And they agree, to my
Yeah.
amazement. And normally they would have cost like 20, 30 grand if you tried
Yeah.
to pay them to come to, an event or whatever. So it's kind of opened up other opportunities.
great.
And with that, that is often through a LinkedIn one message,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
hook in to get them to agree.
What's your typical message look like? If you want?
I do say reaching out. Like I
Okay.
specifically choose words that are going to kind of like resonate. And I say reaching out because I think that what that implies is that the other person will generally respond because you're kind of asking for help. And I often ask more for advice. I make it completely about you,
Yeah.
not about me at all. Like, for example, Brenton Kane, who wrote the book about how to get millions of followers, I sent him a quick message on LinkedIn and said, hey, like I read your book and I loved it. It was awesome, your strategies and things in there. Have an Asia Pacific audience, and because he's US based. So that can be a bit of a leverage or a benefit.
Let's add value, right?
Yeah, but he would never normally necessarily tap into that kind of audience or database. And, he's in lockdown too. He wants to expand. He's got programs and products and books and things. Would you mind, speaking live for half an hour, sharing some of those hints and tips and insights? And he just agreed like that.
Yeah.
So, I kind of have a little bit of a behavioural psychology underpinning to some of the language that is used.
I think it's critical to, as you say, reach out and not talk about yourself. I think that is probably the most critical thing. Talk about something that you read that they wrote, or something they commented on, or something that they're involved in.
Yeah.
Is definitely a better way to get. And it's not. And the first message shouldn't be about the sale. It should be about, hey, how do we get, or
Yeah.
even a compliment, and then maybe follow up 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later or something like that. If
Yeah.
you bombard them, you do become a pest.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's something that you learn and acquire. But I'm still not great at it. I'm still
sure you're good. You're all good.
figuring it out as we go along.
But I guess you asked about how South Australian business might go international.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
absolutely next question. So
Yep.
international, talk to me because
Yeah.
that is overwhelming in its own right.
Mhm,
You think about, where do I start? How would I even service
Yeah.
internationally? So
Yeah. Well, I don't know if this is going to be right for everybody, but if I
Mm.
can sort of share about some of the things, that I've sort of learned over the years. And the first, so with Workforce Blueprint, we're doing heaps of work, different industries, traveling, as I say, all around the country, every state and territory, doing a lot of speaking gigs, all this kind of stuff. But I'm passionate about helping other people, particularly around their economic dependence and developing their workforce. Okay, is there a way to have more of an impact? And I had a couple of people in my network that were doing international work already. So in 2013, and I think this is important, even though I didn't realize how important it was at the time. We do regular strategic planning sort of cycles. So I put it into the vision of the company that we would be going global and international, but without much detail, to be honest. And then...
So it's planting the seed almost.
Yeah, it's almost like convincing myself. I'm the managing director, so I tend to talk myself into things.
Yeah.
And then I'll talk to other people about it, almost like as if it's happening, and then I'll have to make it happen.
Yeah. It's on the radar. I need to.
Yeah.
That's just the way I'm going now.
I've said I'm doing it.
Yeah.
So it's So put that into the strategic plan, and then from this one person in particular that I knew that was doing a lot of international work. She was based in Queensland at the time. She's doing heaps in Asia Pacific. And, we'd networked over the years, and I said to her, well, have you got any ideas or suggestions? So she did do a little bit of a review of the company, our products, our services, the website, marketing materials and things like that, and wrote up a little bit of a plan with some recommendations. And some things are incredibly basic. For example, put +61 in front of your mobile phone number, if you're always quoting Australian stats or use blogging strategy a lot, you can't just have all Australian content. So from her recommendations, we changed a few things, and she's, testimonials is really big, that sort of social proof. So getting more recommendations on LinkedIn, testimonials on the website. But with the blogging strategy, sort of like, okay, well, what's the countries maybe that we might want to work in, and what's the locations that you want to travel to? Because I often tend to put in mini breaks and other things around this. So I brainstormed a list of those countries or locations, and then I've worked with virtual assistant teams for a long time. So they do a lot of research then around that, and then we form up blogs and post. And that then immediately internationalizes your website content, it changes your SEO, it gives people the understanding that you have more of a global perspective. So that's some simple things.
That it's the perception thing, isn't it? Once you've seen to be international, people start. Your confidence grows in your business, doesn't it?
And then because you're talking about it with people, so the reaction would be, oh, I didn't know that your company was going down that path. I thought that you were just, doing stuff locally or nationally. And then people... it's always about getting in the forefront of people's minds. So this one guy that we've worked with, since 2013 till now, who basically was the gatekeeper. So I originally thought, how on earth are you going to build these networks in all these different countries? Like, it just seems impossible.
Well, it's blowing my mind right now.
Yeah. But the key that I realised is that people in my Australian network are already doing this work and can recommend or open the door for you. And they've got their networks. So you don't have to necessarily go directly straight out to that other country where nobody knows you.
Yeah.
And if you get that warm introduction, it's like anything, but in an international context, it's so powerful. And because I work in that area of education, entrepreneurship, innovation, development, that network internationally is quite small actually. So when you get to know a couple of people in Australia, and this one guy, he wins all the work for his organisation from Department of Foreign Affairs and the Australian government, and he's an amazing fellow. He's such a fantastic role model. he then called me up on, it was like Christmas Eve. I was at home with the girls. We're like cooking, getting ready. And like he calls me up and sees, I did not screen this call. I answered this one. And I'm like, interesting that you're calling. How are you? And he's like, Wendy, fantastic, but I've got a couple of things I want to talk to you about. Okay. He goes, we've got a couple of projects coming up. Would you be interested in working in the Maldives and in Bhutan? I'm like, yes. Yes, I would.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. So it was really through him initially.
Yeah, wow.
And
so how do you... Okay, so next step is, how do you then actually work there? Do you just do you fly over there? What is it always relying on you? Do you have to employ people? Like, what is the...
Depends upon what it is, but often it is, there is a level of who you are and what your expertise is about. If you're in a knowledge-based business, right? So if you're the lead, if you're the managing director or you're the lead expert or consultant, like, you can have other team members for sure. But internationally, particularly in some Asia Pacific regions and countries, they want you because you're the managing, you're the top person, right? So this
they
is
don't
how,
want second best.
That's it. So that's something you got to definitely sort of manage. And obviously through the pandemic things have changed, but I was going to, and not just me, other team members too, we were traveling a lot internationally. So these sort of projects we're involved in typically involve an in-country immersion with people, could be representatives of the government or heads of industry or like top entrepreneurs from that country. And you're just meeting them. I mean, you do as much prep and understand and research as you possibly can, but there's nothing like being there, right? Yeah. So, and I'd never been to the Maldives or Bhutan, for example.
I'm sure it wasn't that nice.
There's fascinating sort of context to it. So, like in the Maldives, for example, I went to Malé, which is the capital city. It's only a 2 by 1K island. Yeah. You can literally see across the whole island. And it's strongly Muslim. There's no alcohol there. At the time, it was relatively gender, like strong gender lines. So the women were not as well supported, perhaps. I mean, they had significant job roles and things, but the men would often dominate the conversation, this sort of stuff. Yep. So you've got to learn a lot whilst you're there, and even your dress. When you go to Bhutan, and this is when I was with Nelson, who was a great role model. You bow and you put your hands to your knees if it's somebody important, and if you go down to your ankles if it's royalty. Now we met royal family and went, and the parliamentarians and ministers. Yeah, wow. And I didn't wear traditional dress at first in Bhutan, but then I twigged and I'm like, okay, I think I should. So I, got some traditional dress and wore that. And again, you've got to just be quite self-aware about your communication and body language. And it's not like you have to necessarily, there's not like rules, because it's all very contextual. Mm-hmm. So it's not black and white. Yeah. It's kind of like when you're there, as long as you are open to this and aware, you'll pick up on how you need to behave and what you need to do.
Well, you do what you can to influence, right?
Yeah, but also I guess in lots of these cultures, there is hierarchy, there is things take longer, there's VIPs, there's ways that you've got to acknowledge people and put others definitely before you.
So when you're standing in front of royalty in another country,
actually I met the prince on the plane, but I got a selfie. Yeah.
What's going through your head at that point? Are you thinking, how have I ended up here? Or,
holy crap, how did I get here for sure? And you have to pinch yourself sometimes. When we went to the Maldives, we had afternoon tea in the palace. Yeah, wow. Like with advisors and things. And I'm just like, I can't even believe that I'm here. And I'm like, people wouldn't believe it, do you know what I mean? Because it just seems so different to what your life is like normally. But because of the sorts of projects that you're involved in, you're sort of representing the Australian government. I mean, not directly, but you are like a role model there for the country. And so you've got to also be mindful of, how you behave. Like we went to ambassadors' houses and the embassies in Indonesia, for example, and all sorts of
So what
places.
was the way? It was like workforce planning for the country? Is that kind of what you're like?
Yeah, so...
Because a lot of our listeners really understand the whole workforce planning, but from a business perspective, not from a
Yeah.
country
Yeah.
perspective.
And I guess there's operational level workforce
Yeah.
planning, you know, which is a bit more day to day and
Yeah.
even like a more sophisticated version of rostering. Then there's strategic workforce planning,
Yeah.
which is what Workforce Blueprint does. So that's looking at where are we now? Where do we want to be in 3, 5, 10, sometimes longer time periods? And figuring out the gap, and then what do we do to bridge the gap? So with these projects, some of them are down that line. So with those first ones, it was with the government representatives who wanted to look at the workforce needs for the whole entire country.
Mm-hmm.
Then we've had heads of industries that are looking at their own sectors and then contributing that up to a national picture. You know, we've had people representing large corporations as well, where they're looking more at their company. And then because you're doing work, which is basically we've not got enough people or we've got too many people, that then leads into that whole discussion about entrepreneurship and job creation.
Mm.
So that sort of built over a few years. And then we've had like top 25 entrepreneurs come multiple years in a row from Indonesia or from Bhutan and other countries. And that's been more about supporting individual entrepreneurs, but also building ecosystems in other countries and learning from Australia and vice versa.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah. But I did have this experience when I went to Indonesia for one of these first programs, and we were in, I think we were in Bandung this time. And I looked at the different companies, right? But sometimes you can't tell exactly who they are until you get there.
Mm.
And we were doing the kind of like opening session and people were introducing themselves. And I realised that there was a guy there from Gojek, and I don't know if you know Gojek, but it's the #1 unicorn company in Indonesia. And it's like does scooters and things like that, but now they do ticketing, massages, as basically any kind of services. Huge. And when that sort of sunk in, and this is, you know, early on in the piece, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, like we have to completely shift some of the content that we've got here. You know, it was too basic. Literally had to change it overnight because yes, we did have small, you know, solo entrepreneurs and things there, but they still had massive followings on you know, socials. And then we had the biggest, most impressive, you know, startup in the...
So the scale is just...
And, you know, Indonesia's 250 million people. So there's lots of... They have this 1,000 startup program, which means 1,000 unicorns, right? Wow. So that funnel is huge to then get to this. So... You know, sometimes I have these moments I'm like, oh, you know, I really have got to work hard and quick and fast to do this and, you know, kind of like draw out that expertise. And in the end, we've hosted 5 or 6 unicorn companies now. So I got you know, more twigged into that. Yeah. But that first experience was like, oh, my goodness.
Well, it's just... the old, you know, everyone's favorite word at the moment, the pivot, right? You're able to pivot on the spot, and
it's like survival. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to look like an idiot or embarrass myself or not run this program to the level that it should be run.
Yeah, because you get one crack at it.
Yeah, and you know, they then obviously talk and network and share feedback, and so that was like a 3-day kind of immersion that we did there, and then we hosted. What we generally host those groups in Australia for a couple of weeks and design the whole program and again give them access to people that they would never normally meet and then go back a couple of months later because everyone has a project or something like that they're working on and then they pitch that and present that back. Yeah.
So to recap on going international.
Yes, yeah.
Look at your existing networks.
Yeah.
Join certain industries and stuff like that, forums?
For more like forums. Like, for example, I had another opportunity where I was on this UNESCO Univoc forum, which is the United Nations. And there'll be, in any industry sector, there'll be kind of like more like internationalized forums and networks and e-news and stuff like that people can get. And I saw this post, which was like, oh, hey, we're going to run this entrepreneurial leadership program in Bonn in Germany. You know, leaders from around the world applied for it. And I reached out to the guy who was running it and said, oh, hey, you know, are you interested? Do you need some facilitators? And are you interested? I saw that you were looking for this, that, and the other, and sort of, you know, put myself forward. And I ended up getting that opportunity, right? So they flew me to Bonn in Germany. Yeah. You know, you're at the UN HQ with a view over the Rhine. working with all these
It's
countries.
amazing because I think most people, me being really speaking from on my own behalf, I look at those international stuff and go, yeah, there's no chance. So what's the point?
But, one fund that we applied for, nobody else from Australia applied for,
Yeah,
right? So I know it's counterintuitive because you think everyone's going for it. They are not.
They're not.
So if you see these opportunities, you have far more competition locally and nationally than internationally.
Yeah.
It's bizarre, but it's how it works.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
I want to dive into the entrepreneur mindset, something
Yeah.
that you work with a lot of your entrepreneurs with and
Yeah.
people starting. I know you've got the switch start scale.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just trying to get my S's in the right way there. Someone comes up with a great idea. They want to start a business.
Yep.
Entrepreneurship and starting your own business is not for the faint-hearted. It is a tough gig, especially if you are looking to scale and grow a team and have people and human beings work with you and partner with you.
Mm-hmm.
It can be, the ups and downs. I often say to people, you can have one of the best days and worst days in your business in the same day. Like the ups and downs, it's just crazy the way it throws. It throws these, these curveballs at you all the time.
Yeah.
What is your advice for someone wanting to start a business first and foremost? And secondly, how do we develop the entrepreneur mindset? Is it for everyone?
Like it potentially can be. Like I always see things as glass half full and positive. And if somebody wants to do that, I don't think that you're just born with it or anything like that. I do think you can develop yourself down that path. But you definitely have to be committed and you have to be humble and you have to learn a lot. So I think that anybody potentially could pursue an idea and make it happen. But there's some fundamental things that you have to kind of do. So because I meet with people that it could be still a business idea or they could be startup or scale up, sometimes people have a concept but they've not done any validation or testing whatsoever. Or maybe they've started and got going, but they've got stuck. And often it is about their confidence too, like self-imposters, massively real. And they talk themselves out of things. And I frequently have clients tell me, I just don't know what's the steps or what I should prioritize or where they should spend their time, energy, and effort. And that's often because they don't have any other outside kind of support or influences. They just think it's going to somehow magically come from their brain as to what they should do, which it doesn't. No. So I sort of believe in having like structure and a plan and logical, practical steps. So when I work with people, we do like this A to Z action plan and we look at everything related to their idea, their business, and then we figure out what their priorities are going to be. Now, if they're already up and running, like number one, always sales. It's always sales. And I've definitely observed people that have got unusual beliefs sometimes about money, like am I worthy or can I ask for this amount or what should I be charging? Like there's a whole thing that goes on in people's brains about that value.
They discount themselves
or think that other people are better. They compare themselves a lot. So, you've got to have ways of controlling that because it can get out of control and it will destroy you. You've got to have people around you that are going to support you. Like sometimes I meet people and even their partner thinks that what they're doing is a joke and their kids make fun of them or whatever, right? So just that's never going to be...
Yeah, constant self-doubt.
But it's also reinforced, like really meanly and directly, like what you're doing is crap kind of thing. So you've got to think about... your networks and who's going to support you.
Well, absolutely. It's an interesting point because everyone else is putting their fears onto you and you're then taking that on.
Yeah. And mostly it is risk-based about money.
Yeah.
When you boil it down.
Oh, without doubt.
That's, can you still contribute to the household? These sorts of questions.
Which makes me wonder because you're saying the first and foremost is about sales, right? And I often say the same thing. Get the clients in, get the product out, and sell as much as you can, and then worry about all the back end. Sales is a dirty word though.
I know.
People don't want to sell. I'm purpose driven. I'm this. I'm that. There's all these sort of cliches that they use. the ultimate goal is to sell your product, is it
Mm.
not? So figure out a way in which you can, and
Yeah.
then connect it to a purpose. Yes.
Yeah, for sure. And you got, if you say, for example, you do want to reinvest in other purposeful activities, well, you got to have money coming in. And it's not that you are overly focused on money either, because then people think you're an idiot, right? You have
Yeah.
to be really balanced about this.
Which just gives you options.
Yeah, well, people have to still want to see a need to buy your thing,
Yeah,
whatever your
correct.
thing is.
Yeah.
You know, you still have to be serving clients, and there has to be a need for it, and not just a need but a want. There has to be a problem for sure, but the market has to be ready for it too. And if you are confused about that, or if you're a bit standoffish about that, it'll come across, and people won't have confidence in you, or or your products or services.
So is the idea then, so you going back to the entrepreneurial mindset,
Yeah.
step number one, learn sales. Is that kind of what you're saying, or find ways to sell? Like, where do we start in that?
I mean,
space?
sales or value, like somehow provide value.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, ideally, yes, of course, you're going to get the money sort of side of it. I mean, heaps of people that I meet with too don't have a budget or a plan necessarily around that either. In some respects, that can come a little bit kind of later, I guess, because you still have to go through those validation if you're really early stage, right? But even if whatever business you're doing, there still has to be a component of sales, even if it's focused around things that are non-profit or whatever. There still has to be an element, relationships based or whatever. But you know, in my business, I've got a mix of clients. So with Workforce Blueprint, it's more B2B or business to government. In Switch Start Scale, it's more business to consumer or client. So you can't always have those. With the relationships with business to business and business to government, yes, you have those ongoing connections with. You can't have a personal relationship necessarily with all your customers and consumers. So you got to be practical about these things. Yeah, you got to make it easy to buy as well. Like so many people make it hard to buy from them.
Got to get through a loophole to buy something from them.
Oh, you've got to get a quote or a proposal. It's got to go back multiple times, or you can't find it easy enough on the website. They don't have a shop. You know, so.
What is the common pitfall that you see from some of the entrepreneurs that you work with, and what holds them back? What holds most people back?
There's kind of like one thing that's about them and another thing that's about their idea or their business. So definitely that confidence. Most people understate themselves. Every now and again you'll come across somebody really cocky, and you know, people won't like them anyway. But most people understate themselves, and they're not confident in their ability, and they shoot themselves in the foot, and they even verbalize this to themselves about, oh, you know, you shouldn't be doing this, or somebody's better or whatever. On the product service experience side, it's the validation. People don't get the thing quick enough to a cheaper and easier version of it to test it out. Then they might put it out there and they listen to advice, like we were saying before, that's not even from somebody that's ever going to, you know, use your product or use your service. So they go down rabbit holes because somebody over here suggested, you know, to try this strategy or whatever. So it's evidence-based validation that is true, that is reliable, that is coming from, you know, an appropriate sort of source. Yeah.
How much emphasis do you put on the personal growth aspect of entrepreneurship in the consistent development of self throughout this? Because you know, you can dive into business and really want to grow, and you might have a good product, you might have something that people want to buy. But the further and further you get in, the harder and harder it gets, right? Because there's more aspects that, you know, we're hustling every single day. There's so many things that you need to do. Productivity then falls because you're just answering emails all day long as opposed to actually getting sales out the door. So all these things come into play. But actually developing yourself and growing yourself and spending time with a coach, or spending time watching YouTube video, or whatever it might be, reading books. We're big readers here at SynergyIQ, so we read a copious amount of books, you know, learning as well as implementing and executing. Is that something that you put a lot of emphasis in with your...
Yeah, and look, this is related to whatever people's personal learning styles are as well, because some people might enjoy theory or reflection or more practical things. And so there's no question, like learning and mastery of skills is important, and that is an ongoing kind of process. But I have seen examples where people distract themselves from the real work by doing too much of that as well.
Yeah, I've
right?
read every other book but never started a business. Yeah.
Exactly. Or I watch all these videos, or I even listen to all these podcasts, or they do all these programs.
It's analysis paralysis. No?
Yeah. So, like, yes, you have to consider your ongoing development, but it's got to be like, I always think about it from a learning needs analysis, training needs analysis base. And look, there could be 30 things that you could do, but you don't have the time, energy, and effort for that. So what are the top priority things that will get you the best kind of return on that? And it's similar to things like networking and events. So like, I do go to a lot, right? But that's because of the sort of work and role that I have, and I host heaps of them. But sometimes I see people going to stuff, I'm like, why are you even going there? Like, you can go to some networking events for friendship and connection and support. That's valid.
Yeah.
But if you're not going to enough events or not in enough networks where your actual customers and clients are, like, why are you doing that?
Yeah.
You're doing it for some other kind of purpose. And maybe that's, again, a bit of a way to step back from that sales or whatever.
I think it's just really as figuring out who your typical avatar is, or the persona that you're trying to. If you're targeting the C-suite, for example, and you're going to sort of random catch-ups, networking drinks sort of thing. Yeah, there is a bit of time wasting. So it is, how do you get into the rooms with the executive team? Yeah. Do you start off with those lower end networking and then move your way up, or do you just like?
Maybe depends how confident you are. Yeah. Like, networking definitely is a core capability that you're going to have if you're starting up a business, or you're the leader of your business. Absolutely. How to have good conversations, how to listen, how to be focused on the other person, not yourself. Yeah. Not to be cocky and arrogant and those things where you just see people and you just go, no, avoid that person. Yeah. You've got to still give value first, and you can't expect that something's you're not going to sell, meeting somebody for the first time, and that would be offensive even if you tried to do that. So for practice and for development, perhaps there is some networks that you might go to. And I always think it's important. Even though I was doing a lot of international work, I still kept grounded in more like a local regional network. Absolutely. Too. So, but I guess what I'm saying is, regardless of what you do, automation technology-wise and all your systems, you still only have a limited amount of time and energy to put into things. And so you've got to think through, how do you chop your week up? Sometimes I have conversations with clients and they'll be like, oh, can I just talk to you about how I am spending my time and how I have got my calendar working, and then I show them mine, and then because I've got lots, I block out even dinner with the kids, you know what I mean? Yeah. So,
this is very topical at the moment. I am very much in that space of learning how to be more productive and use my calendar to the point where I'm, even putting in my calendar now when I go for a run or something.
Yeah, like I do that for sure.
Yeah. It's not something.
Not that I run, but
it's more about it's something that I'm trying to evolve, because I've always been the type of person that just rocked up and did anything and just kind of whoever screamed the loudest I'd jump at and just do that first. So really utilizing your time. I know that you do a lot in that space, and you mentioned before the 4-to-1 method. Can you give us a little bit of insight what that looks like? So from a productivity point of view, and any hacks you might have.
Yeah, for sure. So like a really practical example, you do a webinar, right? Yeah. You're going to record it. You are going to then obviously do a follow-up email and send that recording out. You might share it on social media as well. You're going to get it transcribed. You're going to turn it into an ebook. You might chop it up and turn it into blogs. The video content you might repurpose for an online program. Mm-hmm. So that's the sort of thing that I mean.
Efficiency, yeah.
Yeah, and even like I've got a client and she's just published a book. So she used her podcast, got her episodes transcribed. That's the chapters of her book. So I've helped people figure out what's the best way to use this 4-for-1. Like if you can get more than 4 out of it, you would do. Even something like an e-news, right? You might do an email e-news that you might do monthly perhaps, because you want consistency and communication. Mm-hmm. You're then going to chop that up for social media. You're probably going to have a blog that you also include in your e-news, so you're going to think about ways that you can repurpose and reuse content multiple times over. One of the things about your calendar and your time, like I wasn't like this at first, like I was pretty resistant, But now I have a mindset of outsourcing first,
Mm.
and that's completely changed so much. So
So from a VA point of view, or
well,
or
yeah,
hiring
like I
someone
use VAs, but you have to change your mindset. Like at first, my husband Scott's like, "You're just doing too much. Let's try out a VA." It's like 15 or more years ago. I'm like, just don't think they'll do it good enough.
Yeah.
I'm not
they don't
sure.
do it the way I want to do it. Yeah.
Exactly. What am I going to get them to do? Anyway, we found somebody through one of those sites and interviewed them, and they did 20 hours worth for free. It was databases, I think the task was, and a few other bits and pieces related to socials or research. And their work was outstanding. We paid them, of course. But, over the years, we've then used them and their team. They've scaled up to 20 people at a time for us, depending upon different projects. But what you do is you think through, okay, I've got these projects coming up, these events, these programs, opportunities that, we want to write these blogs, we're going to have this content. And you get the VAs to do all that ground research first, because you don't want to use your time or one of your team members' time doing that kind of work. So the sort of things that our VA team does is they look at Google Alerts, things that's appropriate to repurpose for our social media. They develop databases for us. Say we get a project, like maybe just recently we did a project related to, we were researching a project related to hydrogen.
Mm-hmm.
So they could do all the research from around the world related to that topic. Or maybe we're doing a workforce plan related to a town or a region, so they'll do that. Maybe we've got events coming up with Switch Start Scale. So, things like setting up the Zoom, the Eventbrite, the Facebook event.
Yeah.
So if you can think about that first, because you're always going to be a dollar value, way above these sorts of kind of admin tasks, and even your team members are. So it's like, if you can put yourself into that zone, then your efficiency just becomes, nuts.
Yeah. I really like that.
Yeah.
From a diary point of view, how did you get to that point where you managed your diary to the level of booking in time with your kids?
Yeah, one daughter doesn't like that, so I can't send her a meeting request, but the other one's fine. I don't know how many years I've done this for now, but I mean, I essentially use a Google Calendar, right, and have recurring tasks in there, and then I normally see clients for at least 3 days a week, and then I block out some, office catch-up kind of time, and then more like some development, either business development or personal development, and then there's events and things.
So what does that look like from a
like hourly blocks, literally?
Yeah. So if you've booked out 3 days for clients,
and then it's one client per hour.
One client per hour, and all in the same space. Like, how do you manage the locations? Like, are you going to each of the client's site, or are they coming to you?
Clients are normally coming to me. With Workforce Blueprint, I'm normally going there. So then we'll put travel time either side.
Yeah, okay.
I do have a Australian-based personal assistant as well, and which I only did more recently, maybe in the last year or two, because the biggest stress that I had in my life was email. So I get like a ridiculous number of emails. So she set up a really systematic folder system and automatic, responses and rules. And now I only have to look at a small number of urgent or actionable emails, as opposed to the other things that are more for noting or reading or whatever. So, and she also looks at my calendar. With Switch Start Scale, my calendar is publicly up on the website, and we use Calendly, and people book in either online or face-to-face. And then, if there's travel time, that gets booked out.
Yeah. As well. I use the online meeting tool through our CRM.
Yeah.
And the one thing that frustrates me with it is that people can book random times, right? You give them time frames in between. Yeah. But then I might have a meeting at 9 o'clock, for example. Yeah. And then someone else books in for 11 o'clock. And then no one will book in that middle piece. And so I'm kind of sitting around for 2 hours, and I'm not very productive within those 2 hours, because I really find that I prefer to manage my own diary, so I can really block them in certain way. I'm still trying to work this out.
Well, I think with Switch Start Scale, because it's a different sort of service, people can book in for the 1 hour coaching and mentoring, online or face-to-face. They can choose. They've got the options. They can do 15 minutes and they can do 30 minutes actually as well. when it's more business development, say for example, we've got some clients at the moment that are councils that want to do workforce plans. Well, we're going to go to them, and that's going to be more an email conversation back and forth to find a time.
Yeah.
But in my calendar, I've still got a chunk booked out for that kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay.
And at first, when I got Calendly, I wasn't good about the travel and stuff like that. So I messed it up at first. It takes a little bit of time to get used to it.
Yeah. It's a way. Yeah. There's an art to it.
Yeah, and I was definitely at the beginning probably having too many people book in. So then I pulled that back to chunking time.
How important is it to work on the strategy and go back and do that office work and really just concentrate on the future focus and the plans and the 1, the 3, the 5-year plans, all that sort of stuff? You talk about being a leader within your own business. It's about thinking strategically. How much time and effort do you put into that weekly?
Well, again, I'm not sure if I would carve this out specifically because it happens often. Sometimes it happens in formal times, like when you are reviewing quarterly or annually or whatever, and often go away to do strategic planning, like some location. So there's that, but I think it happens in other moments, like when you are driving or you are waiting for somebody or you are transitioning, sort of thing. That's how my brain works anyway. So I definitely read a lot and follow a lot of other people too on social media and stuff like that. So with Workforce Blueprint, the focus is the future all the time, future of job, skills and work. And naturally your mind just sort of sits there, perhaps because of the sort of person that you are and the personality, and you're always looking the horizon and what's coming next. But your work informs it too, because if you're working in that space, you get all of these kind of inputs that you would never normally get about what that picture is kind of looking like. So you need some processing time for that. But I guess, you've got to have some, formal time set aside. I think those regular review periods and then, a couple of days normally each year for that, longer term strategic planning.
How do you manage the best way I'm trying to think of putting this is the approval of diction, essentially of getting back to people. When people email you, there's especially people that you really want to do business with or work with, or people within your own team, and you really want to respond to them as quickly and as precisely as possible. So, instance, you see the email pops up or someone rings you and you see the text message, whatever it might be. There's this constant feeling that you need to get back to them, which can take you away from your day-to-day, right? And can take you away from doing more important strategic stuff and general operations. How do you manage the feeling of the amount of people that you need to get back to? Because you say you got emails coming left, right and centre.
Yeah, you get notifications on your phone all the time.
Correct.
So you have to put the phone face down.
Yeah.
Particularly when you're with clients.
Well, I've turned notifications off, but even if it's a client or if it's a potential client or if it's our staff or whoever it might be, there's this always constant feeling, I need to get back. It's always sitting in the back of my head. I need to get back. I need to get back. I need to get back. How do you manage the feeling of doing that?
This might not suit everyone, but I drive everything to email. So even on my phone, it says, don't leave a message, send me an email.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because
I did get that message.
Yes. I'm not great at listening to my phone and responding to people, but also if I've got clients, like it's just not possible.
Yeah.
So, I drive all the message to email, and then because I know my personal assistant is there daily, she's sorting through stuff anyway. And then I know that I only have to have a look at certain things. So I would expect to get back to people 24, 48 hour kind of period.
Do you earmark that to them? Do you say?
No, I don't. I just think that's a expectation. If somebody thinks that you're going to get back to them within an hour or two or even same day now, I think that's a bit tricky, and maybe it's more about what's coming from them rather than you.
Yeah, correct.
So sometimes we put other people's expectations on our selves.
Oh, it's funny. I had a conversation with friends and family the other day, and we're all in disagreement. Everyone was in disagreement with my theory on this. If someone rings you and leaves and you miss the call, 99% of the people in the room that I was talking to said that it is an expectation that the person is to call back.
No, not if they don't leave a message.
Correct. And that was exactly my argument. So thank you very much.
Definitely not.
I'm going to
replay
replay
a lot of the time
this.
it's bloody scammers and stuff. A lot of time it's scammers and stuff anyway.
That's what I'm saying. But if you know if you know them, you should call them back.
No,
it
if
is
they
your
don't leave a
expectation.
message.
Yeah, exactly.
If they don't leave a message, and then because of the voicemail that I've got set up, people send me an email anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Anyway, we're going down in semantics and that sort of stuff. You talked about the future of work and looking more into the longevity, and you are with Workforce Blueprint, you are doing, looking further forward.
Mm-hmm.
The future of work right now, it's up in the air. We got job shortages left, right and centre. We got people screaming for work, people stealing and poaching
is nicer.
Is a better word. Poaching left, right and centre. We've got big companies coming from overseas saying we're going to set up 1,000 jobs only to take away from the smaller teams. So they're not really creating jobs. They're stealing poaching, I should say. They're robbing Peter to pay Paul. So you got all these problems in the world at the moment. Specifically, I'm talking specifically Australia.
Mm-hmm.
Two questions to come out of this.
Yeah.
What does the future of work look like out of this pandemic?
Yeah.
And secondly, where are we going to get these people from?
Yeah. The future of work is still very human focused, right? Even though we might use all of these different technologies and so on, and we'll see much more of a crossover. For example, there is a company that's been working for a number of years on a humanoid robots,
mm-hmm.
and they're out of the US and out of New Zealand, and a lot of companies have kind of picked up, like banks have picked them up, emergency services and so on, right? But they still have to be programmed and trained at this stage by a human, right? So that's just a complete reality. And in fact, we are going to have to go more. Before the pandemic, we probably thought we were being dragged down this automation path, with some people being a bit resistant to it because they thought that people would lose jobs. Now we're in a situation that if we don't maximize that automation, because we already don't have enough people for the jobs, particularly in a Western developed context, we should probably say that.
Yes. Yeah.
We need the automation to work even better for us, and for that to be amped up even more, because we just can't fill the jobs that we have vacant at the moment. Now, we're sitting in Adelaide, South Australia at the moment, not locked down. There'll be people listening, I'm sure, from other places where the perspective would be different because of the context of being locked down and seeing lots of businesses struggling. But post-lockdown and post-pandemic, all the signs are indicating a massive boom. And even in our state, we have already experienced, because we had more of a lighter touch experience, perhaps let's say around coronavirus, we weren't locked down for so long. We've already seen evidence of those booms happening. So the situation for us, and perhaps maybe a state like WA, for example, is massive skills and labour shortages literally across every sector, and in regions it is acute, right? So we have to have a picture that involves much more automation and technology just to handle that. In terms of getting more people, there's a lot of latent capacity in our current labour pool that we are not tapping into. And employers, industry, we're going to have to be much more broader minded about where we're going to get people from. So because our borders are shut at the moment, like often we would use a skilled migration, even a backpacker workforce or whatever, to give us some room to move, and that's not an option for us at the moment. So that's causing pain in very particular sectors. But there are cohorts where we could do way more. For example, women who are mothers. Right? There are lots of women who are out of the workforce at the moment. This is, thorny issue about childcare and OSH and other support, but there's latent capacity basically if we could do something to engage mothers in more flexible kind of work arrangements and to manage those caring responsibilities. There's definitely more capacity working with people with disabilities. Aboriginal, Indigenous people, absolutely there is too. And there's another perspective which is kind of like culturally based as well. When you work with, in a business and industry context, you're networked in a particular way. When it comes to these other cohorts that we're talking about, people coming from culturally diverse backgrounds, they're networked more in a community, friendship, family way. So we've got to get our heads around, if you're looking to recruit people to fill those vacancies, how to kind of like partner up with those leaders of those different communities and groups and whatever, to tap into that latent capacity as well. But still, we're going to have to increase our population for sure. And when it comes to regions, I mean, there's just some jobs that you can't not do by going to the
Yeah,
place.
correct. Well, I think in the regions, you told me you told me the statistic the other day, 1,000 people in one community.
Oh, well, one town has 1,000 population. They have 100 jobs.
100
So
jobs
that,
available.
Available now.
Yeah,
so that's crazy.
Ridiculous.
Guess what the number one job is regionally that's in demand?
What's that?
Cleaner.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know if you have a cleaner. I mean, I do, but it's hard to get a cleaner at the moment.
We've just had one. It's the best thing. I can't believe it.
It's bloody hard to get them, though. It's really hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to get cleaners, pool cleaners, gardeners, maintenance people, trades, right? So in other countries, like in Europe, for example, the EU, the European Commission, has a whole labour mobility strategy about the way that people kind of like move around. And obviously it's been change over pandemic times, but that's something that's coming back on the ball again. So we have to think more about workforce development strategies that allow flexibility of work, labour mobility, and definitely tap into these underrepresented groups that have got significant capacity there, but maybe we're just not seeing it.
How do we tap into them though? Is it like door knocking? Like what is the option?
Well,
if
like
they're not applying for jobs, then how do you?
They might be applying for jobs. So there's one side of it where maybe the way that they're applying for jobs is not matching the criteria, or there's some screening out, or there's on that supply side, we definitely have to do more work for people to understand what the jobs are and to get them representing themselves in the best way possible with their resumes, applications, and that sort of thing.
Because that's half the battle, isn't it?
Yeah,
I see
you've
selling yourself on a piece of paper.
Yeah, so there's many programs and initiatives, coming out around that sort of side of things. The other thing is, like I was mentioning about how people are networked. They're networked through family and friends and community groups, or kind of like country-based associations. So that is how you have to tap into those pools of people. And that does take time, but you've got to build up relationships with those key leaders in those communities, or people that might already have, a group of mothers, for example, that are connected for another kind of purpose. Yep. So it's different. It's not a business in industry way of thinking about how we network. It is more of a family, friends, community-based way of doing it.
So going back to the entrepreneurs, right? And we're talking about switch, start, scale. You're working with entrepreneurs to switch, start, and then scale their business. So as they're scaling, they're going through this growth. They're working on their growth strategy, executing their growth strategy. In amongst that, they need to have a recruitment strategy, right?
Yeah.
In a world that we are in today, where there is a skills shortage, how do you manage the both? And where do you put most of your time? And you can't grow without people.
Yeah.
And there's not enough people to grow. So do you sit in limbo? What do we do here?
Well, you outsource everything that you possibly could first, right? And not just locally, but internationally as well. Then you think about the way that you structure up the specific job roles.
So outsource recruitment, or are you talking about outsource
the tasks, but not the core. Do you know what I mean? More like the admin, the incidental, the kind of time-consuming tasks, right? So if because you want to do this lean still in terms of scaling up. So whatever you can outsource and get off you or your team's plate, you will sort of do that. Then you'll think about how you're structuring up those job roles in the mindset of who you want to attract. And you have to have much more flexibility from an employer point of view about the way that you're thinking about start time, finish time, hours, flexible kind of work arrangements and packages. Definitely working from home is here to stay forever. Yeah. Some tasks can't be done that way, so you've got to think through the way to best structure that up. If you are looking at other diverse pools of people, like people with disability, for example, then the job role needs to fit much more around them, and their strengths. So we've got to sort of flip our thinking a little bit and not just think, okay, we're going to put this job out and we're going to have this start and finish time. And this is what the contract's going to look like. It's much more of a negotiation. And with the attraction side of things, particularly if we're a smaller company or a startup, probably all of us could think of times when we've seen one person wreak havoc in an organisation and it's just destroyed everybody and the work and the relationships.
Yeah, the narcissists.
So a values match has to be key, and it can't just be, has to be more like an evidence-based approach to that values match. And I guess you've got to think through a bit like the avatar of the target market, but more detail about who is it that you really specifically want to attract, where you're going to find them or more people like that if you want that kind of, style in your business. And then you've got to be way more open and flexible as an employer, thinking through how you're going to structure that. I mean, we probably are going to see significant increases in pay rates and, what people are expecting because of these shortages.
It's an interesting comment because, you talk about when I said before, some of these big companies coming over here and poaching, and they're offering wages that the smaller businesses cannot afford to, but not necessarily can't afford. They've got it fixed in their head that I'm not paying that. I'm not paying someone first year out of uni that much when the big companies are. Is it a matter of the smaller companies changing their mindset and actually just accepting it, or do we hold on to where we're at?
Like, you're going to have constraints around your resources, right? If you're in that scale up mode. So I guess you've got to really be clear about who is it that you want to attract. And money is always part of the equation, but for some people it's not the be all and end all. So again, it's a match on that values and that alignment. Like, what else do people care about? And they will choose, this startup because they're going places over a multinational where they're just like, the millionth employee or whatever.
Your number, yeah. What is your biggest concern for the next 5 years in the job market, in the world of work?
Well, I think this picture that's emerging at the moment, there's a few things in the short term and then the longer term. With the whole discussions, and not to get too political, but around vaccines and whatever, I think there is certainly like division happening in workplaces and in
you can already hear it, the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated.
Yeah, and I sort of, saw this
movie.
emerging last year thinking this is going to be something that HR and, OD and training managers and workplace health and safety and CEOs are going to have to take more seriously around that. So, it's like, because it's not just a business thing, or a company thing, it's a personal thing. So that crossover is really, really tricky. This picture now emerging of labour and skill shortages in Australia, and lots of other developed countries are reporting something similar. I don't think that we expected this after the pandemic. We thought, a number of people will lose their job and then there'll be a big pool of people to draw upon. But what's happened is significant shifts between industry sectors. And a lot of people have reprioritised work really around, well, my family's more important, my health's more important. I want to do something that's lasting, that's different or whatever. So it's not I always see things as opportunities, right? So I think structurally there'll be many industry sectors that will have to, that almost like won't have a choice really to shift around. They'll be forced because they don't have another option. What I would want to make sure that we do see is that we are more inclusive with diverse sectors and people, and are more thoughtful about that in terms of recruitment and attraction strategies and retention, and the way to sort of structure work up. And I guess the other thing that is an opportunity is just thinking more globally and internationally, like how can we tap into other resources? How can we have a bigger impact? How can we see, from an entrepreneurial point of view, like I'd love to see more companies playing on a bigger stage, on a world stage than what they are at the moment, and people with a more open mind to that kind of opportunity.
If Scott Morrison knocked on Wendy Perry's door and said, I need help with the workforce of Australia. What's one piece of information that you would give him?
We need a vision for the workforce. Like, I can't believe that we probably haven't had a vision for the workforce in any way, shape or form for at least 15 or more years. So we used to have one that was kind of related a bit more to the education sector.
So what does a vision look like for the workforce?
It is some sort of statement about, so we would pick a time frame that is sensible and logical. And I think we can't go too far out because it's just not practical to do that because there's lots of things outside of our control. But there is a particular process when we're doing workforce planning that we go through around scenario planning that makes these things more concrete. So we might pick, 2025 or 2030 or something like that and talk about the version of the workforce, the picture that we kind of want, and we make it as real as we possibly can. And that considers all the drivers and the external factors and the things that are we in or out of control of. But at the moment, we don't have a clear vision that is consolidated, that, multiple stakeholders agree to. We haven't had that picture for a long time. And it's interesting when you do international work, because you'll see developing nations that, have got far less resources than us that do have these sorts, and they've had them like in place for 30 or 40 years or something, and they update them regularly. So definitely a vision, for our workforce, picking a time frame that we can get, common ground on.
Is it hard to have a vision for the workforce? We often hear this statement of it's really, really difficult. My children are 9 and 7, 2 girls, 9 and 7.
Yeah.
And it's really difficult to talk to them about what the future of work looks like, because their job may not have even been created yet, right? So when we have this vision about the future, talking 20 in 30 years, wow, my brain can't even comprehend. Like, if you look back 10 years ago, Uber wasn't even around. All of a sudden, Uber, it's just taken over the world.
For sure.
Who actually goes to a restaurant anymore and picks up the food? I don't. It's Uber Eats and only. That's the only way I work. So those sort of things is really interesting to me. So we have this vision, but we're almost visioning something that we don't know exists. Or is that just the way it's always been?
Well, you sort of touched on my pet hate, because I cannot stand it when people say, what are we training these people for? They're jobs that haven't even been created yet. I cannot stand that statement, because I feel like it's partly a cop-out, and actually it's not true. We have got heaps of evidence and information about what that picture is looking like. But there's another side to this, right? And this came about when we were doing a project specifically in the defence sector. And we were working with all these defence primes. And we're like, okay, what's the defence workforce? This is the supply side chain, not defence forces, going to look like in 5 years' time. And, people, push back, resistance. Like, well, if you don't know it, who bloody knows it, right?
Yeah.
So we went through this process to shape up what that would look like. And in a way, it was because they defined it that they then worked towards it, and that's what they got, right? And similarly, we've done workforce plans for regional towns that have been on the lowest socioeconomic levels that you can imagine, like the worst unemployment, the worst language literacy and numeracy, no opportunity. But when you do bring stakeholders and people together to do that picture, it completely flips it. Now, economists will say, no, this is the trend and you can't change it. Well, that is just simply not true. You can change it, but you have to get people around the table that are passionate, that are logical, that have some influence to actually make that picture. And, you can make that picture quite concrete, actually. So it's not out of your hands or out of your control at all. It's completely within your control.
So there's an element out of your control.
There's a little bit of an element out of your control. I mean, there might be other world factors.
But the majority is we kind of know. So just on that then, do you believe that the gig economy is something that is going to be on the rise?
Yeah, for sure. Like the kind of, portfolio of work that people have now and that your kids are going to have, like they're going to have a side hustle or a side business or a gig thing. They might be employed by somebody else as well. They might pursue a passion project too, or, contribute through not-for-profit or social enterprise. Like the mix of things will be more. Absolutely.
So what does the big corps look like then? How what does the CEO work on?
Got to be paid lots of money for that. But
well, that's what I'm saying. What does the CEO work on when the majority of their staff are like gigging out? They're almost consulting to the company themselves. Is that what or am I completely missing the mark here?
I think you're sort of combining two things, because you're sort of saying about corporates and, people that are working for corporates, gigging for that corporate. I think that people will have a mix of roles that they're sort of playing in a mix of incomes. And partly it's because like a risk management thing, really, but also because you do want to pursue things. Now, from a corporate point of view, often you need to have more inside information about specific industry sectors because some of the markets are really complex that you're sort of operating in. But if you don't have that vision, then whatever happens, right? And you are behind the back foot all the time. And often in a large corporate like that, like imagine the kind of insight that your people have got about what that picture should look like, what your customers and clients have been asking for that they haven't got yet. So I often get the question, where is this information going to come from? Or, for example, what's going to keep these people at this company? What should we do to retain them? Ask them. You have to. But you've got to have that concrete picture. And if it's too fluffy or not defined enough, then people won't understand what they're working towards. It's got to be more collaborative these days. Like, it's not just going to be something that comes down from up above. Yeah.
Communication is key, right?
Yeah, and you're going to get lots of ideas if you do a more collaborative approach from people that you would never have uncovered normally. Yeah.
Brilliant. Just conscious of your time, we have gone
Sure.
over slightly. There's one last question.
Yeah.
I'm interested in this hashtag humble hustle. Is that something that
Yes.
you're working on or working with at the moment?
It is my personal hashtag.
Yeah.
So I use it a fair bit in social media, and that we touched on it before. Like, there always is the hustle. Like, you're
Yeah.
always thinking about what's coming next, what's the next opportunity or the project, or because of that future perspective, what's on the horizon. But the humble side of it is really about that core belief that we touched on at the very beginning. This is not about you. You know, this is about supporting and helping other people. And you can have hustle, but it can't be harsh and it can't be too salesy or too direct. It's got to have a humble angle to it. And there's been lots of examples over the years where humble hustle has played out. Like, for example, we had one when we had the Indonesian group. We were in this corporate training centre in the middle of Sydney, and this one guy had a biggest pet care product company in Indonesia, and we saw that what's the vet that does the Shark Tank judging? He was in the
Pet barn.
Yeah. They were in the building on the same floor in the
Yeah.
sort of training room down the end.
Yeah.
So a humble hustle was when I knocked on their door, hey, I know this is completely out of the blue, but we just wondered if we could introduce this guy to you. And he met the head sales manager for the whole country or whatever and followed them up. So you've got to take opportunity, but you've got to be polite. You've got to use your manners. There's some old-fashioned things in there, I think. You've got to be focused on the other person all the time.
I never understood the people who rose to the top who have almost torn every relationship in part on their way to the top. I never understood how that even worked, because if there is something that I've learned is that people have very long memories, right?
Yeah.
So treat people well, often give as much as you can, and then that'll always, and you don't do it for the reason that it'll come back, but you just know that it's just the way the universe works. The more you give, the more you receive, right? It's just the giving nature of the human being.
Yeah.
So it always confused me.
I think it comes back to bite them eventually. Like, I think we've seen that with a number of
sleeping
people.
Well, at least they're probably sleeping with one eye open all the time, isn't it? So.
Yeah, that have got themselves into trouble, even though it may have come out years later.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Righto, we'll finish off with a few quick fire questions.
Sure. Okay.
I've had probably, I reckon, 20 odd questions that I didn't ask. So we'll have to come back for a round two.
So
but
nice.
the quick fire questions it really is just getting to know a little bit more about you and getting inside your brain. Something a bit quirky, but we are big readers. I did mention earlier, SynergyIQ, creating Synergy podcasts. We're big learners, big readers. What's one book that you're reading right now?
It's got F in the title. What is it called?
Is it Mark Manson's How Not to Give a Fuck?
Yes. I'm rereading it actually. I have read it before.
It's actually really good. It's really
but I'm rereading it. Yeah.
I'm a big fan of that book.
Yeah.
Because it's very straightforward. It's black and white.
Yeah.
No bullshit. Straight to the point.
For sure.
I love it. What's one book that you feel like, let's talk about entrepreneurs in general.
Yeah.
What's one book that you would recommend to them or anyone starting off in business as a foundational book?
Blue Ocean Strategy.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Yeah, for sure. So don't be in the red.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Excellent. I love that one. Do you listen to any other podcasts?
Not many normally, no.
Just this one, isn't it?
Just this one, that's it.
If you can invite 3 people for dinner.
Oh, yeah.
Who would it be?
I really would like to invite Oprah, because I do have a thing about maybe having a TV show or series or something like that.
She's a remarkable
human being. I think so. I think Oprah. I mean, I wouldn't mind Julia Gillard, because she just lives down the road, and
Does she?
So she's at Brighton, so she would be good.
Oh, Brighton! I was going to say she
to have as well. And then I don't know who the third one would be. I'm thinking somebody that's sort of like UK based, probably because I want to go there, so I'd have the excuse to go across there.
So your husband doesn't get the call up?
Oh, I'm
No.
dealing with him every day, so I'm all good. Yeah. I can't think of the third one. Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Not a problem. What's the best advice that you've received?
The best advice is to ask for advice first. And I think some of this comes back to my parents as well. We have a family saying about having your back. So even though you might be in a tricky situation or with your partner, with whomever it might be, we don't then play it out or discuss it in public. We always have each other's back, and I do that for the team members and family members, and they do it for us.
I love that. It's brilliant. If you had access to a time machine,
Yeah.
you could go anywhere,
Yeah.
but only one trip. So forward, back.
Oh, I can't come back.
You can come
Ah,
back,
okay.
but you can only go to one destination.
So I could go forward, I could go back.
Wherever you want.
I mean, at first when you said that, I was thinking I'd go back to see Jane Austen times in Bath in England. So I love that era.
Yeah.
But I probably would go to somewhere like 2050 just to sort of see what it's like and whether or not the things that we think it's going to be like actually are.
We can get that vision right.
That's it.
Sell the vision.
Come back and do workforce plans. Very Back to the Futurist. Let's do a workforce plan for 2050.
Yeah.
Oh, no, we don't know what's happening. Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good.
My answer to that is buy the almanac.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Make some money out of it too. You could have an entrepreneurial spin on the betting.
Yeah, absolutely. If you had one superhero power, what would it be?
This came up the other day. I think invisibility cloak.
Oh, that's not a power. It's a cloak.
I know, but to be invisible.
Yeah,
to be invisible then. To
Really?
be invisible. Yes.
I find that a bit creepy.
Well, it could be, I guess. But I was sort of thinking more about, I like that idea because, perhaps there is a little bit of a listening in or whatever, but, to see what really goes on in some of the different circumstances, the situation. I'm thinking more work-wise.
Yeah, okay. Be a fly on the wall.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
Because it'd be hard to open a door in the middle of a meeting.
That's right. Or maybe then you've got to be able to go
the
through
Ant-Man,
walls or something.
have you seen the Ant-Man?
Yeah.
You can get
Yeah, sounds good. But I just like that idea of, I don't know, seeing what's really going on. Because sometimes I think people have a public persona or they present things in a particular way. That's not really what's going on.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
There'd be a few political conversations going on.
Yeah, and I have an interest in politics too. So I'd like to suss out that,
Is that the next steps for Wendy Perry?
Many people have asked me over the years, and I think it's too nasty. That's probably the main reason why I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Is I think it's too nasty and it attacks people's character and is harsh on their relationships and their family. But I wouldn't rule it out completely, but it's a slim chance.
Yeah, I don't see the reason for getting on TV as a politician, on TV and bagging the other position. When do we do that in business? We don't ever have a meeting with someone and then just bag every other business.
The behaviour
just doesn't make sense.
Bad.
It's
so
horrible.
Well, not bad for everyone, but I wouldn't want to do that. I definitely would like to make a difference, beyond business and industry, but I don't know if that's the right way to go.
So what is the next steps for Wendy Perry?
Yeah. Definitely scaling up even my business even more, and we work in about 30 different countries now, but we want to work in more countries, and I think where we'll be now with those labour and skill shortages, there's heaps over the years that we've learned about how to address those. So it used to be a bit of a push to get people to see that this was a real problem, but now the pain of it is becoming quite sharp. So I'd love to see Australia with a vision for their workforce and every industry sector with a plan, and regions and towns comfortable that, they know where they're going as well.
So I'll tag ScoMo in this.
Oh, yes. I don't know if he knows who I am, but some of the other polys do.
Well, he knows who I am. So. Yeah. No, I'm really joking. But it'd be good. It would be good because, yes, we do need some vision about where we're going with the future, because it is a question that all businesses are asking, right? You and I work very similar industries in the people and culture, HR, workforce planning world, and the strategic world. So it's a question that we get asked every single day. What is happening?
Well, and also it can't be a political cycle based thing. You know what I mean? It can't just be like whomever's in power It has to be a longer
Every 4
term.
years it changes.
Yeah, it has to be a longer term picture.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
It has to be what we want. Do you know what I mean? Like what's feasible, reasonable, but what we want, not what we just get given.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Well, that's the problem with politics.
Yeah, for sure.
We're almost told
Told what to do, which wouldn't suit.
Let's not go down that path. We could, Thank you so much for your time today.
No worries.
It's been amazing having you on and hearing your insights. Thank you for all the work that you're doing too.
I appreciate it. Like I just love people, like light bulb moments and seeing people change their lives, particularly in relation to having their own business. Like that's what I want to see more people do. So I really appreciate the invitation.
Thank you.
It's been really insightful questions.
That's good.
So thank you.
Yeah, I winged half of them. So that's great. Look, I feel like the work you're doing is much needed in this world today. So keep up the good work and kudos to you and the team.
No worries. Thank you so much.
Beautiful. Thank you, guys. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks.